Hi there, welcome to Gospel-Based Conversations. My name is Dr. Chaz Roll, and I'm the lead pastor at Glen Baptist Church, and I am your host for this podcast. Welcome, I'm glad you're here. This is our very first podcast, and I want to take the opportunity to just talk about what Gospel-Based Conversations is intended to be, and talk about what we're going to do with this. I'm in here by myself right now. This episode is just going to be just me, but in the future, I'm going to plan on having other guests with me. Ryan Miller, our student pastor here at Glen Baptist Church, is going to often be with me talking about whatever our subject matter is for the episode. But for today, it's just me. We'll have some other folks as well, maybe some other pastors in the community or other guests and people like that. But from time to time, I'll just do it myself. But I wanted you to get a sense of what this podcast is going to be and why I think it is important. One of the things I've talked about is, as a pastor, I like having conversations about important matters, things that matter, theologically, life, culture, everything that relates to our existence and how we live. And I like to think of it in obviously theological terms and through a Christocentric lens. But it's hard to speak to the things I want to speak to because I'm very limited in my time and my opportunities. I preach on Sunday mornings and I do a Wednesday night Bible study. And other than that, my conversations throughout the week are very individual based. It's hard to have larger conversations, especially given the time limitations in just those two moments. And there's many other things that I would want to talk about that don't fall into the regular preaching ministry or the regular Bible study ministry on Wednesday nights that I can just simply never touch, but I think are important. And so there's got to be another outlet for us to have those conversations in a weekly, regular basis, so I can hit on those things. And so that's what I think the benefit of this kind of a podcast is it gives me another opportunity to speak into your life, have you speak into my life as we have these conversations back and forth, and with other people that we invite in here to the studio. Hopefully you can glean a lot from this. Hopefully it'll be helpful to you as we walk through all these things. I want us to have an honest conversation. I want it to be grace-filled dialogue about life, about culture, things that you're dealing with, things that we're dealing with, real life situations, and just talking about how do we think about it? How do we deal with it? How do we organize those thoughts? And what's important and why is it important? And just thinking through all the things of life through that, biblical lens. So let's talk about, first of all, what do we mean by gospel-based conversations? Well, first of all, when we talk about gospel-based, what we're talking about is, conversations that are rooted in a biblical, Christocentric worldview. What do I mean? I mean simply what I believe about life, what I believe about existence, what I believe is important, all comes to me through the Bible. God has revealed what is important to him, what is valuable to him, what is truth, and he's delivered that to us through the scriptures. And so I take the scriptures and I glean from that what then is objectively important to me because it's important to my Creator and what I think about things because it's what is true. And so then that is the lens by which I see everything else. And so my conversations, my speech, my what I listen to, what I view, what I do, all is filtered through that lens of reality that comes to me through the scriptures, through God's word, through his revelation. And how I process that information is all gospel-based. It's all through that lens, through that worldview, if you will. That's how I see the world. It's how I have my values set. And so when I want to have gospel-based conversations, what I'm saying is I want to have conversations around that worldview. How do I view? How should we view politics? How should we view life? How should we view education? How should we view entertainment? How should we view the church? How should we view all these things that we do, all these things, all these moments that we're caught in a biblically based, Christ-centered way? And then also the term conversation is important because I want it to be not a debate, not a lecture, not a sermon. I want this to be a conversation. That's one reason why I want other people in here with me. I want us to go back and forth, and I want us to be able to challenge each other on these things that we're going to be discussing and hear, our various viewpoints, but always bringing it back to the worldview of Scripture and of the gospel. That's what we want to filter everything through that we talk about. But we want it to be a conversation. And so hopefully it'll be beneficial to you because I think we don't intentionally do this enough. Think about everything that we do. I mean, even our sports and entertainment and the things we do for fun should be gospel-based, gospel-centered, Christ-centered in the way that we choose our recreation and how we go about engaging in those recreational experiences. And so nothing's off the board. Everything is fair game. Everything is able to be talked about, and like I said, in an honest, thoughtful, meaningful dialogue back and forth, thinking through these things with these gospel lenses, so to speak, that we want to have on. This is what Jesus did. When Jesus lived on earth in his ministry, he just sat down with people and had conversations with them about where they were, what they were doing, why they were doing it, and he took them to the Scriptures and he showed them his worldview and put it before them. And if you think about the Scriptures, you think about the New Testament in particular, the Gospels that show us Jesus engaging in conversations with people. This is exactly what he does. He meets people, the woman at the well, or the tax collector up in the tree, or whatever the case may be, the fisherman out fishing on the sea. He meets people where they are, and then talks to them about what their issue is, whatever it is they're struggling with, whatever it is they're dealing with, whatever it is that's going on, and then he turns the conversation back to the Scriptures and says, and he'll say things like, "You've heard it said this, but I say to you," and he turns it back to his worldview, showing people what the Christ-centered worldview is on that situation. So I hope to do that. I hope to talk about that. I threw out a word there a little bit ago called I said a worldview. What is that? A worldview is just the way you view the world, the lens by which you view anything. It's like putting on eyeglasses. A worldview is the thing that helps you see things clearly. If something's fuzzy, if you don't quite understand it, your worldview kind of helps you put it into focus and put the missing pieces together to help you make sense of things. And people can have a worldview based on all kinds of different things. Some people have a very self-centered worldview where the thing that puts stuff together in their life is themselves. And so we don't want to have a self-centered worldview. That's not healthy. That's not good. Then you become the center of everything. You become the ruler of what is right and wrong, and that's not healthy, of course. Some people have a worldview that is focused on a goal that they think should be accomplished, whether it's a political worldview or just a power worldview, where as long as this thing is accomplished, as long as this candidate is in office, or as long as this team is winning the championship, or as long as this political agenda is achieved, then that determines how I view everything else. So people have all kinds of worldviews that govern the way they see the world. a gospel-based worldview or a Christ-centered worldview is one that says Jesus and the scriptures is the thing. The gospel is the thing that governs how I view the world and how I put it together. And so it's important because we all have a worldview, whether we admit it or not. But if we claim to have a gospel-centered worldview or a Jesus-centered worldview or a gospel-based worldview, then we need to be very intentional about how we talk about things, how we look at things, and how we discuss things. What's the real-life impact of this? Well, hopefully one real-life impact is going to be you'll be encouraged. Maybe one week we're talking about parenting. Maybe another week we're talking about going camping. Another week we might be talking about shopping for something. One week we may talk about politics. We may, like I said, talk about any number of things. And hopefully what will happen is you will be encouraged. You'll be encouraged by the conversations that we have. You'll be encouraged to know that you're not the only one struggling with something, or you're not the only one wondering about something. You'll be encouraged to talk more clearly about your worldview and about what is important to you. Hopefully you'll feel more comfortable dialoguing with people, maybe coworkers or neighbors, about your worldview and about how you view things. And hopefully also I think there's a benefit here of we got to be careful that we are not drifted away by the culture. What do I mean by that? I think there is a culture that we live in that is dragging us. There is a current in this culture in which we live that is dragging us further and further away from Jesus. If you've ever been in one of those lazy rivers, like at a water park or a fancy resort or something like that has a lazy river, you get in the raft or the tube and you just sit in the river, and there's a current and it flows and it pushes you a certain direction. You might want to go right, but the current is pushing left, and so you're going to go left. You're going to go naturally the direction of that current. And it's called a lazy river because all you're supposed to do is you're not supposed to direct your direction. You're supposed to just sit, and you're supposed to just float, and you will be carried along by the current. This is exactly what our culture is. We all exist in a lazy river where the culture is telling us, just sit back and relax, and we'll take you where we want you to go. And you're going to end up at a place that is going to be very, very far from Jesus if you do that. We, as Christians, those of us who have a Bible-centered, gospel-centered worldview, are forced to live in a culture that makes us swim against the current to go where Jesus wants us to go. We have to be intentional with that, or else we will wind up in a place far from where Jesus wants us to be with our time, talents, abilities, our condition in our life. We're going to end up very far from him if we just drift and go with the current of the culture. We have to swim upstream. And so hopefully this podcast will help equip you to swim upstream, to fight against the current of the culture that we live in. We live in that lazy river. We live in it, and it can be fun and it can be enjoyable, but we got to be careful to always be going against the stream. And hopefully this conversation will help you swim against the current of the culture, but allow you to enjoy the culture as well for all the good things that it has. And what I want to just say a little bit more about that. In church history, there was a time, where many Christians argued for something called separatism. This goes back to the 1800s when there was a group of people called the Puritans who were concerned about the condition of the church, that the Church of England was becoming too similar to the culture and was being corrupted by the culture. And so Puritans argued that the church needed to be more pure. Within that group, there was another group called the Separatists, and they were called Separatists because they were willing to separate completely from the church and from the culture in order to make sure that they were pure. And they actually criticized the regular Puritans for not being separatistic enough. And so the separatists, really fought that battle against the culture by trying to remove themselves completely from the culture. In other words, to go back to the lazy river idea, their idea was the best way to fight against the culture is to just get out of the lazy river. If the lazy river is taking you a direction with the current that you don't want to go, then you just need to find the steps and get out of the pool, and that will help you not go that direction. And I understand, where that comes from. But here's the thing: Jesus, I don't think, has called us to remove ourselves from the culture. I mean, if you think about what Jesus did, Jesus was very much part of the culture. In fact, Jesus was criticized a lot by even his own followers because he didn't leave the culture enough. He was criticized because he went and hung out with the sinners. He was going places that they thought he shouldn't go and meeting with people they didn't think he should be meeting with. They thought Jesus should be more separatist than he was. But Jesus was resistant to that. He was okay with being in the culture and being with the people. Why? Because that's what we're called to. If you leave the culture, you have no impact in the culture. If Jesus doesn't meet with sinners, then sinners aren't going to be saved. So we have to exist in the culture, and I don't think removing ourselves from the culture is the answer. The answer is to involve ourselves in the culture, to swim against the current, to be very alert to the problems and the dangers of being in the lazy river, but fight against it enough so that you can still go the direction that Jesus wants you to go. You stand out and are clearly not like everyone else who's just enjoying the lazy river going the direction of the current, but you're encouraging others to come along with you, to fight the current with you. Not get out of the pool, not leave, but stay in the pool and just swim against the current. And yes, it takes more energy. Yes, it takes more intentionality. Yes, it requires a little more effort and work, but it's worth it. It's worth staying in the pool, and it's worth swimming against the current to go where Jesus wants you to go. So hopefully you'll be encouraged with that. As we have this conversation, you'll be encouraged to engage the culture, live in the world in which we're called to live, and at the same time, follow Jesus, not by getting out of the pool, but by simply swimming upstream, swimming against the flow of the current. So hopefully that'll be encouraging to you. This is basically just a test case of this podcast to see how everything's working in the studio, to give you a vision and an idea of what is to come, and allow me to kind of get this idea of what this is supposed to be kind of recorded so that you can know my heart and know what the point of this is. I want to encourage you to reach out to me if you have ideas for the podcast, if you have specific things you'd like me to address, if there are, and listen, I say this carefully, because politics can get you in trouble. I'm willing to talk about politics. I want to do it carefully and responsibly, but I'm willing to have those kinds of conversations in circumspect with circumspection. But I say that to say nothing's off the table. If you have questions, and I'm not going to get into politics like a lot or anything, or I'm going to try and stay away from specific issues and things like that, but just how do we as Christians live in this world? And politics is part of that. And so I don't want it to be out of reach, and I want us to be respectful as we have those conversations. But my point is, to get back to it, if you have questions, if you have things you want us to talk about in this podcast, it's conversation, and so I'd love for you to reach out to me. You can reach out to me on Facebook, Chaz Rowland there, or on Twitter. You can reach out, send me a private message or a comment on a post, and let me know what you'd like to hear, and give me the ideas. Would love to include those in these ideas or in these episodes that we do. And because, like I said, I want you involved in the conversation. That's an easy way to get you involved in that conversation, is by you having input in what we talk about. And so I'm very interested in engaging with you in that way. So please let me know. If you have any ideas, any questions, any comments about that, just like I said, reach out to me. I will include that in the list. No telling how long it'll take before we get to it, but I'll try and get to everything that you suggest or ask, because if you care enough to ask the question, then I want to care enough to deal with it. And hopefully, like I said, you'll be encouraged by it. So I'll wrap this up and we'll conclude. Thank you for joining us today. Remember to swim upstream. Don't get out of the pool. God has a purpose for you to be in the pool, but don't just enjoy the lazy river by jumping in the floaty ring and drift around the pool. Swim upstream. Go against the culture. Speak clearly for Jesus in a gospel-centered, Jesus-centered way, and glorify Him and get to the ending that God wants you to get to for His glory. All right? God bless you, and thank you for joining us for this first episode of Gospel-Centered Conversations. God bless. Bye.